At some point, being stressed quietly stopped being a temporary state and started feeling like the default setting. Not in a dramatic way, just a low-level hum of urgency, like something important is always about to happen, even when it isn't. We usually treat that feeling as motivation, or pressure, or adulthood, depending on how optimistic we're feeling that day. But there's a difference between stress doing its job and stress moving in permanently and rearranging the furniture. And once it's settled in, it starts making decisions for you, usually the fast, impulsive kind. This is less about calming down and more about figuring out who put stress in charge in the first place. Stress has a great reputation for something that quietly ruins most people's evenings. We tend to think of it as this annoying side effect of modern life, but originally it was more like a temporary upgrade, a burst of energy, focus, and strength when things really mattered. The problem is that it was never meant to be always on, like a browser tab you forgot about 3 weeks ago. When stress shows up briefly, it helps you push through hard moments. When it moves in permanently, it starts charging rent in ways your body can't afford. Which brings us to what stress is actually doing behind the scenes. Stress doesn't ease in politely. It hits a big red button. In a stressful moment, your body rapidly changes its priorities, flooding you with adrenaline to act now, not think later. Heart rate up, breathing faster, focus narrowed. If the situation drags on, cortisol joins in to keep things running longer, reallocating energy away from anything that isn't immediately useful. Digestion, recovery, and long-term maintenance get put on hold. This is very effective in emergencies, but less so when the emergency is just your brain replaying conversations. And unfortunately, your body doesn't really care what caused it. Your stress system has exactly 2 modes, threat and not threat. And it's not great at nuance. It evolved in a world where danger was physical, obvious, and usually over quickly. Modern stressors are none of those things. An email, a deadline, or a news headline can trigger the same response as something actually trying to hurt you. Worse, it often happens quietly, without you noticing, dozens of times a day. So your body stays on alert, reacting to things that don't require action, burning energy for problems you can't physically escape. And this is where the real overuse starts. Most people treat stress like it's free, which is a bold financial strategy. Stress was meant to be used sparingly, in short bursts, and then paid off with recovery. Instead, we spend it on everything. Tiny annoyances, background worries, half-finished thoughts that never quite leave. Individually, they seem harmless. Collectively, they drain you. And not all stress costs the same. A looming deadline is expensive, but scrolling bad news before bed is like putting small charges on a credit card you never check. Recovery is how you pay the balance. Skip it long enough, and the interest gets aggressive, which makes it important to know when stress is still helping. Stress works best when it has an exit plan. If there's a clear endpoint, like an exam or a short-term project, stress can sharpen focus and boost performance. It feels intense, but temporary. The trouble starts when stress has no finish line. When there's nothing to resolve, no moment where your body gets the memo that it's safe again. Without recovery, stress stops being a tool and starts being a background condition. At that point, even things that should be manageable start feeling heavy, simply because the system is already overloaded. And when that state becomes normal, things start to break down. Chronic stress isn't dramatic, it's just relentless. Adrenaline and cortisol keep circulating. Not enough to feel panicked, but enough to keep your body in a constant state of readiness. Fight or flight becomes the default setting. Rest and digest gets quietly ignored. Muscles stay tense for threats that never arrive. Your body is always preparing for something, but nothing ever happens. It's exhausting in a very specific way, the kind that doesn't go away with sleep, because the system that's supposed to shut things down never gets a chance. The body keeps receipts, even when you don't. When stress sticks around, tension stops being a moment and becomes a posture. Shoulders creep up, jaws stay clenched, headaches feel like part of the schedule. Digestion gets weird, either sluggish or chaotic, because it's been deprioritized for too long. That metabolism shifts, insulin stops working as smoothly, and your heart keeps working overtime for emergencies that never arrive. None of this happens overnight. It's slow, quiet wear and tear, which makes it easy to ignore right up until it's not. And the brain doesn't come out of this untouched either. Under constant stress, your brain changes its management style. Long-term planning, reflection, and nuance get dialed down. Quick reactions and shortcuts get promoted. This was useful when survival depended on speed, but less helpful when deciding what to say in a difficult conversation, or whether to make a major life decision. Memory slips, focus narrows, and impulse control weakens. You're not suddenly bad at thinking, you're just thinking with a system optimized for emergencies. Over time, this makes anxiety and low mood more likely, Not because you're fragile, but because the environment never lets your brain stand down, which leads to a frustrating feedback loop. Stress makes it harder to solve the very problems causing it. With reduced clarity and energy, decisions get rushed or avoided, which often creates more stress later. That added stress further limits your ability to think clearly, making escape feel impossible. The longer this runs, the more normal it feels, and the harder it becomes to imagine another state. This isn't a lack of willpower, it's a system caught in its own logic. Left unchecked, it quietly increases health risks and shortens resilience, all while convincing you that this is just how things are now. When stress hits, waiting it out rarely works. Your body doesn't calm down on its own just because you tell it everything is fine. It needs proof. Signals that the emergency is over. Short, physical interruptions can do that surprisingly well. Slowing your breathing, changing posture, stepping outside, or even pausing to feel where your body is tense can interrupt the stress response mid-loop. This isn't about fixing your life in one moment. It's about giving your nervous system a clear message that it can stand down, at least for now. Once things settle a bit, it becomes easier to evaluate what's actually happening. Not all stress is bad, but it does need a job description. Helpful stress usually points towards something specific and ends when the thing is done. Harmful stress lingers without resolution. A simple check is whether rest ever fully resets you. If stress fades after recovery, it's likely doing what it's supposed to. If it doesn't, something's off. Breaks aren't indulgent extras, they're biological requirements. If stress has no off-ramp, it slowly stops being motivating and starts being corrosive. Which brings us to a common misunderstanding. Rest tends to get framed as optional, which is convenient for stress. Recovery isn't about avoiding effort, it's how effort becomes sustainable. After stress, the body needs time in a different mode to repair, rebalance, and prepare for what's next. Active relaxation, whether that's movement, social time, or simply not being on, helps prevent long-term damage. Without recovery, even manageable stress becomes too much. Taking breaks isn't quitting. It's maintaining the system so it doesn't fail at the worst possible moment. Mindfulness sounds vague until you realize what it's actually doing. It doesn't erase stress or magically make problems go away. What it does is signal safety. Slow, deliberate attention tells your brain that nothing is actively trying to kill you, which is apparently very reassuring. That message alone can lower the intensity of the stress response. Over time, this helps reclassify emails, thoughts, and minor worries as non-lethal events. It's less about being calm and more about reminding your nervous system that not every situation needs full emergency mode. Still, even the best tools have limits. Coping is useful, but removing the problem works better. Managing stress while keeping the stressor is like mopping while the sink is still overflowing. Some sources of stress are optional, even if they don't feel that way. Social media is a common one. It's very good at feeding you things that provoke emotion, especially negative ones, because that keeps you engaged. Changing environments, reducing exposure, or cutting out unnecessary triggers can dramatically lower your stress load without requiring extra discipline. And sometimes the stress isn't coming from things, but from people. Certain environments quietly keep your nervous system on edge. Constant noise, unpredictability, or social tension can trigger stress responses even when nothing specific is happening. Interpersonal stress compounds quickly because it's harder to escape and easier to internalize. Over time, enduring these situations takes more energy than leaving them. Changing context doesn't mean giving up. It means acknowledging that some settings make stress inevitable. Reducing that background pressure can be more effective than trying to stay calm inside it. There's a point where trying harder just adds more pressure. Chronic stress doesn't just make you tired, it actively interferes with clear thinking, which is inconvenient when you're relying on yourself to think your way out of it. In that state, perspective shrinks, and everything feels more urgent than it is. This is where outside help matters. Talking to friends, family, or professionals adds capacity you don't currently have. It's not a failure of independence, it's a practical response to a system that's overloaded. Sometimes the fastest way forward is admitting you can't do it alone. Stress isn't going anywhere, and that's not the problem. Life will keep presenting challenges, uncertainty, and moments that demand more from you. The difference is whether stress runs the system or works for it. Used briefly and followed by recovery, it can still be useful. Left unchecked, it quietly erodes everything else. Managing health shouldn't feel like another task to optimize. The goal isn't to eliminate stress, it's to keep it from turning into the background condition of your life. Stress ends up saying less about how weak people are and more about how strange modern life has become. Most of us aren't overwhelmed by one big thing, just a long list of small ones we never quite finish dealing with. Which is ironic because the same system that keeps you alive under pressure is also the one quietly making everything feel heavier than it needs to be. Once you notice that, the goal stops being total calm and starts being knowing when to let your body stand down. And it's kind of funny how much of that work keeps happening even when you're not awake or paying attention. Your body, for example, does a surprising number of unsettling things while you sleep, mostly in the name of keeping you alive and functional the next day. So if this got you thinking about what's going on behind the scenes, that's probably a good place to continue.